The economic survey tabled a day ahead of the budget has made it clear growth will be below 6% this fiscal. In fact, saying growth likely to be around 5.4% this fiscal, outlining some of the bold reforms that are required to bring the economy back on track. It has mentioned several downside risks to the economy, including a poor monsoon as well as geopolitical risks. Let me go across to my guests right now, Sajid Chinoy, India economist of JP Morgan, and Vikram Singh Mehta, chairman of Brookings India, to get a sense of what the economic survey means and what can we expect in the budget tomorrow. Mr. Mehta, to you first. Of course, we know that there are several downside risks to the economy, but do you see the government taking an indication from what they have outlined in the economic survey, taking some of those bold measures to bring the economy back on track, addressing issues like subsidies?
I don't think they have any options other than to address the issue of subsidy. How they do it, of course, is a big question. My own sense is that they face a dilemma, the dilemma of how do you provide subsidized fuel, food, and other essentials to the very poor, and at the same time ensure that the fiscal deficit is kept under control. I don't think the answer lies in completely abolishing subsidies. The answer lies in targeting subsidies more efficiently. They should be, and I suspect they will be, looking to improve the public distribution system. They will be looking to use platforms like Aadhaar, which will target the beneficiaries. They may well be looking to repeat what they've done with regard to diesel, in that there will be a graduated scaling back of subsidies. I suspect that they will look at capping the cylinders, the subsidized LPG cylinders that are on offer to the middle class. So there is going to be a tightrope to walk, but this government has shown its willingness to walk that tightrope. So I'm optimistic that tomorrow we will see a strong message with regard to controlling of the finances.
Sajid, talking about a political witch hunt and talking about the political overtones of the economic survey. UPA's flagship scheme, Narega, coming under immense attack in the economic survey. What's the sense you're getting? Do we see a major overhaul of this scheme in the budget?
You know, I think, just to step back a second, I think that the survey is both very sober and very responsible. And I think there are two governing themes here. One is this big focus on macro stability, which is, we need much more fiscal consolidation. Inflation is too high. That needs to come down and the central bank needs support. But the second theme, which relates to your question, is an economic rebalancing. That there's this theme throughout the survey. We have to move away from demand towards supply, away from consumption towards investment. It's in that context that it talks about these schemes. So I'm not sure that the survey says you should do away with these schemes. I think what they say is the delivery mechanism of these schemes needs to be far better, far more efficient, far more targeted. And I think few can argue with that line of thinking.
All right, so big picture that you're getting, Sajid, if I could get a quick word from you, do you see the government moving towards the path of fiscal consolidation, making sure that they also unveil a big bang, bold budget? Expectations are running high, and with expectation, also the fear that there would be major disappointment if we don't see some of those big, bold reforms coming through.
I think we'll be well advised to temper expectations, because both the expectations that you raise, which is need to proceed with fiscal consolidation, and yet we want big bang announcements, may potentially be in conflict with each other. I think what you need to see this time is, even if the fiscal deficit target of the interim budget, 4.1%, is not met, and the government were to target a larger number, that it's very important there be a very specific and credible roadmap to bring the deficit down in the next 2 years. I think markets will focus on that much more than the fiscal deficit number. And finally, I think this rebalancing that the survey talks about has to start now, that we have to inch away, take some of these subsidies off, but most importantly, make a credible down payment towards more public investment. Without that happening, it's hard to see the capex cycle reviving or growth picking up meaningfully this year.
All right. Right, Brinda Jagirdar, independent economist, also now joins us on the discussion. But before I go to her, Mr. Mehta, your sense on what is expected tomorrow after what we are hearing as far as the economic survey is concerned. Usually what we see in the economic survey doesn't quite translate into the budget, because there are always political compulsions. This time around, many believe those political compulsions aren't quite there. It's the best time to actually address a lot of issues to bring the economy back on track.
Well, I agree with what Sajid said earlier. I think we will see a budget that, or we need to see a budget that sets out very clear economic markers and also a roadmap for bringing the fisc under control. But that said, I'm not expecting a major sort of big bang reform agenda. And the reason I'm not expecting that is because I don't think that there's a need for us to do that at this juncture, or for the government to do that. I think the reforms can be actually initiated outside the budget. What is required, and what I expect tomorrow, is a clear statement of intent that the government must put this country, must put the economy back onto the trajectory of growth. The only way of doing so is to invigorate public and private investment. This requires us to create the enabling environment, which in turn, and more specifically, requires us to introduce or to take away all those factors that had undermined investor confidence, whether it's retroactive taxation, right, whether it's to do with the changes in the contract terms, and so on and so forth. But I do expect one specific sort of roadmap, and that is to do with the broadening of the tax base. I think that's one set of markers that the finance minister will lay down in greater detail than the broader or the specifics of a larger reform agenda.
Okay, so broadening of the tax base, something which is absolutely critical. And I'm hopeful, of course,
that he does talk about the GST.
Right, the goods and services tax, the roadmap for GST, something which is bound to figure in the speech tomorrow. But what will that roadmap be remains critical. Brinda Jagirdar, a quick word from you on the poor monsoon and the impact that it will have on growth. We've already seen the economic survey outline that as a major downside risk. We've seen the deficient monsoon is something, the situation clearly not easing out anytime soon. How badly can it really impact growth?
I think there are a lot of challenges, and the monsoon is one of them. Of course, it's a very important challenge. We also have the geopolitical situation, the situation developing in Iraq and its impact on the oil prices. So it's, and of course, global growth, it hasn't picked up the way it was everyone was expecting it. Given all these external challenges, there are also a lot of challenges which remain within the country. But I think overall, we should really temper our expectations and not expect everything, the budget to do everything in one go. I don't think this is time for big bang reforms. My own sense is that there are so many small doable steps that can be taken, and that is going to really lead us towards this path of a stable and sustained economic growth. And I think that's what we can expect. What I really, my takeaway from today's economic survey was that yes, inflation is going to remain high, and so don't expect the interest rates to be cut immediately. But there are several measures, structural measures, which need to be taken and which the government would perhaps be willing to take. For example, linking this on the subsidy issue, about 40% of the tax revenue spent just on subsidy. So we need to really rationalize that, target subsidies better, link them to the market. And on the supply side, for example, manufacturing, of course, but more than that, agricultural supplies. If you free up the APMC, you can see that the food prices it'll have an immediate impact on food prices. So I think there is a lot of
Right, addressing food inflation is something that we expect the government to come up with in the budget. Quick word from all the three guests, the so-called Achhe Din. Everybody really depending on this budget. You really feel the expectations are too high. Don't expect those big bang, bold reforms to come through. But wouldn't that take away from the whole Achhe Din philosophy, the fact that Achhe Din are around the corner? Do we need to temper those expectations? Because this will be the first major policy document coming from the Narendra Modi government. And that's the reason why we're seeing expectations way too high. Recovery in terms of growth not coming anytime soon. Inflation not cooling off anytime soon. Sajid, quick word from you, please. All right, I'm not able to get through to Sajid's line, but if I could take that question to Mr. Mehta. Mr. Mehta, Achhe Din not coming anytime soon. We have to wait before we see that recovery kicking in, before inflation actually cools off eventually.
Yeah, let's be clear. I mean, no one expects that economic growth was going to go from 4.5% or so to 8% overnight. It's going to be a stage-wise, stepwise process. What can be expected is that we will see a set of measures that will encourage the market to look at a growth of 6%, 6.5% this year, leading to 7, 7.5%, and by 2017, hopefully, we might be at that 8% marker. Now, that is, I think, what everyone is expecting. No one, at least no sensible commentator or analyst, can expect this government to wave a magic wand and remove all the blocks that have been created in this economy over the last 3 years. So, as I said earlier, what must be expected and what should be expected is a set of markers that will lay down clearly the government's intent to actually put this economy back onto the growth path and at the same time meet the social demands of a country that is still very unequal and where there are still many social and social pressures. So I think this is a realistic. We can expect a realistic budget. That's very much like the railway budget yesterday. It was not overly populist. It was credible. It was sensible. And I think that's the sort of budget I'm expecting to see tomorrow.
Okay, Sajid, Mr. Mehta says expect a realistic budget, but people really hoping that it's a budget that will pave the way for Achhe Din. I read your column also where you clearly mentioned we have to wait for the Achhe Din to come. The good times will come, but it's still a long way off. Interestingly, we've got the tables turning now. Today, Congress leader Sachin Pilot protesting in an unusual way on a camel cart against price rise. The issues clearly still remain growth, inflation, and we'll have to wait till some of these issues are addressed in a proper manner. Sajid.
That's right. I think we just need to realize that, as I said, Achhe Din will eventually come, but the role of this budget is not to try and preempt that. It's to deliver, as I wrote, the first dose of antibiotics. So I think we need a serious and sober budget that has a 5-year view. We make the painful sacrifices now to support growth later. What you don't want is a Christmas tree filled with gifts for every single person. So I think a budget that begins this rebalancing, has a graded approach given the bad monsoon to target subsidies more carefully, begins to make investments for public investment, has a specific roadmap for a goods and services tax. I think those are the kind of things that will pay off in a 2-3 year view. So I think the more unremarkable the budget is, like the railway budget, the more responsible it will be and the more effective it will be from a 3-year perspective.
All right, Sajid Chinoy, Mr. Vikram Singh Mehta, Brinda Jagirdar, many thanks for joining us. A good way to leave that. We shouldn't expect the budget to be a Christmas tree with something for everyone, but a more realistic budget. At the same time, expectations running extremely high. That's all from me on the business desk.